everyone. It's Chubby.
And I'm Vanessa, and we
are No Filters, No Fears podcast.
Today's elephant is a level 5.
Yes. And for everybody who's wondering what that weird word is, Gibel is a word that means, and I believe it's from Russia. I could be lying. Now I forgot where I pulled it from. But it means death. It means loss. So today's episode is a level 5 because we're going to be talking about death and loss and mourning and coping and all the things associated with loss. We're not going to do a definition. We know the meaning, but I mean, I think it's fair to say we've all experienced death on some level.
Yeah, many levels.
Yeah.
Because we already know that there's physical death, as we know. There is even spiritual ones, the job ones, all types of losses that we go through, and to everybody we all grieve differently, as we know, because obviously we're all different people. So
yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because sometimes we don't give ourselves the opportunity to mourn the loss of like a friendship, a romantic relationship, a job that we really loved, like those kinds of loss. We don't give ourselves the right amount of mourning time sometimes. We gotta like keep it moving.
I agree with you on that. And also it depends on the person too, because some people, obviously there's a different times for everything too. Some people grieve for the same thing. Some people grieve a month, a year, many times. It just depends, that the time is different from everybody as well. How about the grief of animals, like when you had a pet?
Oh my goodness.
I think that one to me is the deepest one that I lose my shit on. Like I lose it.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that hits the heart.
I've experienced. So my mom is a doctor, and when I was a kid, she would take me with her. And she worked with a lot of terminally ill patients, and she would take me with her, because she wanted me to learn and see firsthand the value of life, right? Because it's not so much about quantity, but the quality of it for these individuals who are like dying of cancer and things like that. And people thought, like, they criticized her all the time that she would take me, but I'm really grateful for it, because it takes away this kind of fear of death. And in reality, these losses is for those that stay behind. The ones that feel the hurt of any loss is the one that, has to move away from it or go on past it. My first experiences were a lot with people that, though I cared for them very much, they weren't blood related, right? Mm-hmm. My first loss of that nature was my grandmother's sister, and I felt it, and it was really difficult. But it wasn't until my grandparents that I realized how poorly I dealt with loss. Friends, you're not used. One isn't used to the idea of losing a friend because they're contemporaries with you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And your brain starts going a little crazy because you place your own mortality in it. It's very changes perspectives.
Yeah, I think the friend one is so surreal because there's somebody you're used to talking to every day. And I'm also talking about the physical death and that friendship loss, those two, like the both. And then all of a sudden they're not there anymore and you literally can't talk to them. So it's strange in a way where you're like, you can't communicate with them anymore. And you're like, what do I do now? I find that very interesting because it's like your brain really cannot wrap its head around that thought that they're gone.
It's funny because even if a friend comes back into your life, that rupture, that distance for whatever amount of time it is, especially if it ends up being long term, not just your brain, but your body misses it. During the pandemic, I lost touch with a friend that I had consistent contact with. and we didn't see each other all the time, right? So you would think that if we don't see each other all the time during the pandemic, it would still be easy, but they were going through some heavy emotional stuff, and it reflected in not seeing each other.
Yeah.
And it felt like such a loss. I was mourning that connection, that consistency of having that support system.
That's the thing with many people right now with the pandemic going on. It's even worse, especially if they are going through a physical loss. If someone is going through a physical, loss, so, someone's death, and it becomes worse on the actual person too that's experiencing it with their mental state and where they are. So it's a crazy times as well to be, with the pandemic, and then just because every day we hear about deaths everywhere, right? But we're like, it doesn't hit home because you're not here. It's not you. It's not,
Yeah.
directly. But once it starts happening directly to you,
It hit different.
so I have a question. So to you, what is death to you? How do you view it?
So growing up, my mom would talk about death in a very interesting way. It was a graduation. Growing up, I touched on a lot of different spiritual beliefs and religious things. I'm not a very religious person. I'm more spiritual person, but that kind of always stuck with me. So that idea that this was a life lived, and that it's una graduación, next stage of existence. And my mother has always talked about it, and so that kind of has stayed with me, and how I view it. It's kind of a celebration of the life that was lived. Obviously, the older I got and the more I could connect, or the closer I was to the person lost, it took a whole different meaning, because I had to acknowledge that there are no memories to be made. Oh no, we're not going to get emotional. There's no more memories to be made and whatnot. So to me, death is still a graduation and a moving on for one person. And it's definitely an opportunity for reflection for those that are left behind. And if it's like a spiritual or a friendship or relationship kind of loss, there's still a moment for reflection and growth, because in that mourning process, what was good, what was bad, what did it leave you with?
Right.
What did it take from you? How about you?
Well, growing up, I didn't have many losses in a sense, because my grandma died when I was 5, and I remember that vividly. But I do not remember coping. Like, I don't know. I don't remember much about the emotions that I felt. I was only 5, but I don't remember much about it. But I remember seeing her, and But as I got older, when I lost my aunt when I was 17, and then my other aunt, I didn't grieve. Like, to me they were gone, and that's it. But to me, I don't find death to be a terrible thing. I think it's just a transition, to a different world, to a different life. They're moving on to a different plane. So they had their physical time, and this physical time was done, and now they're moving on somewhere else. I never saw it as, and likewise, I'm also a spiritual person, so I do believe that they are living their best life somewhere else, the ones that they couldn't live here. When my mom passed away, I was 24, I think, 24. And I thought it would hit me hard, or like, oh my God, normal because it's your mother. No, I didn't. It was just, she passed away. We, did what we needed to do, and that's it. We all grieve in our different ways, but to me, I was like, she's gone, and then that's it. But it hurt more because of my siblings. So it was like that pain that I was feeling was from them, because they're the ones mourning her death worse, than the rest of us.
You've seen their suffering. Yeah.
So that hurt me the most. Not her death, but them suffering from it hurt me the most. So Yeah. I mean, obviously, sometimes I think about it now and I'm like, oh my God, mom will like this show. Let me go call her. Obviously, that happens often. And
Yeah,
then I will text my sister, one of my siblings, and be like, oh my God, mom will really like this. And they will literally text me back saying, really? And then I'm like, oh my bad, yeah. Like I keep forgetting, and
that
that's just
still happens
he's
to
not
with my
here.
grandparents. Does it happen to you that when, like, I had a tia who would call my grandmother or call the family and be like, en un día como hoy se murió fulanito, like remembering the day people would die. And I'm like, qué trágico. But I, the more I experienced like physical loss like that, losing people in my life, it was really interesting to see how you don't consciously remember and make it a point to be like, oh, this is the day that I lost fulanito, but your body feels it.
Mm-hmm.
Around the time that my, the big three significant physical, like death, parting from this world losses for me were my grandparents and Frank.
Oh, yeah.
And every time that the day that they passed or their birthday, so birth and death day rolls around, I feel it. I feel it in my emotions. I become extra sensitive. I think about them so
Mm.
much more, you know, and on my birthday is when I feel those losses in my life a lot because they would typically be there celebrating,
Yeah.
calling me at midnight. So you feel that. Does it happen to you that you like kind of sense it in your body? You're like,
Well, yeah, especially for my mom. Like right now, it's March 8th, and she died on March 13th.
oh wow.
So in a couple of days, she makes 8 years. So since January 8th until now, this was the most excruciating 2.5 months for the family. So every day now for the past 8 years, every time it being around my birthday, 'cause it's February, I spend it in the hospital with her.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, it happens. I feel it.
yeah, I think like to a point, you're uno como que se prepara, you prepare yourself in a way for people who've been sick for a while. Like mentally you're ready, emotionally you're not. Right? Because I had seen my grandmother sick and on a ventilator and the whole deal. Um, but it was the routine of going every day, right? I'm sure you can like it resonates with you, like the routine of showing up, having the conversation to keep it light and not there, and just being there for them. And then the day she passed, I feel like I completely dissociated. Like I showed up just as she was like starting to take her last breath and to say everything I wanted to say that I hadn't said because I didn't want it to add to the sadness. So it wasn't until it happened que me chocó, right? And logically, you want them to be okay and not suffering anymore. And your brain understands this. But your heart, though,
Right.
your heart, though.
But you know what sucks the most is that my mom's thing was instantaneous. It was like this. It wasn't like a process, like she was sick for years. No.
Oh,
She
wow.
was fine for years, and then all of a sudden, like I said, on a January the 8th, I spent Christmas with her. January the 8th comes around, they're like, mom is in the hospital. February 22nd, the hospital said they can't do anything more to her. Her cancer spread everywhere, and then that's it. Lasted a week, fine. She went everywhere. She said bye to whoever she needed to say bye to. Yeah, se acabó la cosa. It wasn't and she has 6 kids, so we all alternated throughout the month. So we didn't really much spend time with her there because we also had jobs and stuff. But we
Right.
alternated and we stayed as much as we can. But I remember It was a Tuesday at the 12, and she came by. Well, not her physical, but her spirit came by to my room. And I told her, I'm mad at you. I don't want to talk to you because I know you're leaving. But that day I was supposed to go see her, but something in me told me not to. The next day when I went, she passed away. And my little sister was right next to her. So it hit her harder than it hit me because
Right.
I mean, even though the relationship was disconnected already and it was whatever to me, but I know it hit my sister harder because she saw her pass away. She was right there,
Right.
heard her take her last breath. She heard her, you know. So,
That's a difficult thing to see.
right, it kind of sucks when it's just instantaneously like that and not like long.
Yeah, no time to prepare.
Right. So it's also like what the fuck? Like you're distilled in this belief, and then when even after the year, you're like, are you serious? You know, like you can't. So yeah,
And there's a lot to be said also for the grieving process.
right.
Right. So I know you have there the 7 steps.
So there are 7 stages of grief. Obviously, you know, I mean, they say that we all go through this possibly because some people actually don't go through this, you know. Like I'm gonna name them all, and possibly I went through 5 of these stages. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
anyway, here are the 7 stages and of grief. Is shock and denial, which is the state of disbelief and numbed feelings. We all been through that one. The pain and guilt. You may feel that the loss is unbearable and that you're making other people's life harder because of your feelings and needs. Anger and bargaining. You may lash out, telling God or whoever higher power that you'll do anything they'll ask if you only grant you relief from these feelings. Obviously, depression, which I think most of us fall in that category. This may be a period of isolation, loneliness, during which you process and reflect on the loss. Then upward turn. At this point, the stages of grief, like anger and pain, have died down, and you're left in a more calm and relaxed state. Number 6 is reconstruction and working through. You can begin to put pieces of your life back together and carry forward. And the last one is acceptance and hope. There's a very gradual and acceptance of the new way of life and feeling of possibility in the future.
It's been a long time. I want to say about 8 years, I mean, maybe more, that my grandparents passed away. It doesn't get easier. um I can talk about them now without bursting into tears every time,
Right.
but the longing is still there, the missing is still there, and especially in moments that I typically would share with them, it pops up. But I've also seen when people ignore those feelings
Right.
and don't allow them, like, I'm specifically thinking about my cousin and like what not feeling. Everybody deals in their own way, and if you don't want to at the moment, that's fine. At some point you have to, because we all know, we've talked about enough mental health things throughout the episodes, right? That we know what holding shit in does, or holding emotions back does. And I I've seen how not coping with either one of my grandparents' loss. And it wasn't just like the loss, it was also the circumstance of life at the time of all our parents, right? So all my aunts and uncle and my mom were like rotating and taking care of my parents, and there was a lot of discord, you know. Sometimes that death of the matriarch of a family or the patriarch of a family can bring around a lot of discord. It brings out the ugly in people. It brought out a lot of ugly in my family. It was really difficult, and everybody wants to be the one that was closest to, or has the most history with. And it's funny because even though I've known Frank, I knew Frank since I was like a little girl, everybody was challenging how long and how well they knew Frank, even when I had been the one to have introduced them. And it was so all those things are so interesting. Everything is a matter of perspective. But like in people not dealing how it starts to show up in the rest of their life, of like being triggered by things, or seeming so like distant. My cousin is a very like emotional sweet mush ball, but in never dealing and never truly mourning those losses, every time it comes up, he becomes kind of stoic. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see.
To the comment of Frank, I only knew Frank, what, 3, 4, when did he pass away? 4 years by then when he passed away?
I think so.
All the experiences I had with him were lovely, and I loved. He was freaking amazing. So he made it in my life in such a short time. People think 4 years is a long time, but to me that was a short time. Because I didn't get to hang out with him as much. Trust me, I would not claim that yo fui la primera. Nope, it happened, and I spent a birthday with him, but it was just,
I mean, time doesn't always have to do with how close you are with somebody, but it's like to appreciate and honor.
yeah.
I think what happens when people pass on, and that's pass on like physically, or pass on like, okay, we're not friends anymore. Es que the ones that remain kind of forget that it was valid. That relationship was valid. No, how short, how long, it doesn't matter. So if one can appreciate that the short amount of time in someone's life was valid and important and special to the person who passed and special to the person who stayed, it's just as valid for someone who lived a life with that person. And I find it so interesting when, like, even on social media, people can be so snippy and nasty about when somebody feels hurt by some loss. Like, people get very affected by certain celebrity losses. And it's because of what that person represented to them. And I've seen people get real nasty. Like, you didn't friggin' know him. Like, get over it.
Well,
okay, but you don't know.
That's how I felt when David Bowie died. I'm sorry, but I've been a huge fan of his music, his work, his everything about him.
Yeah.
As an artist, that when he passed away, I was like, there's not gonna be any more fucking music.
It's devastating. And that's the same thing. Like, when I see people dismiss the loss of a pet, I get so upset. Fur babies and amphibian babies and chicken babies, all kind of animal losses are important. They're your companions.
Don't even get me started on that. One time, okay, so I had this hamster for 5 years. Mind you, this was literally like a couple of like months after my mom passed away, I believe. This hamster, hamsters don't last this long. 3 years max. This was 5 years. So since it was a baby, like una bolita, right, a little ball. It passed away when I went to go feed it. It was just like, I was like crying my eyes out, like, a 25-year-old, like busting, like just crying. And my brother-in-law at the time was like, oh, you could just get another one. Tell me how I told him to go screw himself. That I was so insensitive, but he didn't understand. And I'm like, any loss, like, they meant something to me. Like, someone like this right now probably say, oh, it's a hamster, you can't get another one. No, not really. Not the same personality, not the same attitude, not the same connection. That's not how it worked. I could say the same thing about a baby. You could get another one. See how insensitive that sounded?
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Very, very deep shit. And people think it's not the same. They're both lives. They're the same.
Absolutely.
To me, they both matter equally. I'm sorry. Like, that's how I feel.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like, you're saying that this was also around the time of your mom's loss. So it's like double whammy. You're dealing with like multiple losses. It is insensitive, because sometimes our pets, like I said, our pets are our companions, and they help us cope with other things. So that loss is tremendous, because they give us something that another a human connection can't. You know what I mean? No,
Exactly.
like animals are unconditional.
They are.
They they truly, truly are. They're unconditional in their love and their affection and their loyalty. So those losses are totally felt.
You know what you were reminding me of? Like you were talking about your cousin and how, they're dealing with whatever. I was thinking about my little sister, how, yeah, okay, I get it. We all deal with our mom's death differently, but it's been 8 years. At this time, being still depressed about it, you dug yourself in a hole so deep that you can't get yourself out of it.
I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree that maybe it's time for her to something about it, like approach it so that way she can cope. But like I said, it's been that about that long since my grandparents passed, and it's still a pain that causes me to cry so much. My aunt, my mom, both my mom and my aunt, they haven't really dealt. My mom will remember my grandfather or my grandmother, and pain is so palpable of that loss and that missing. It also depends a lot on relationship, what that dynamic was, what it was that was lost for them, or what guilt remains of what wasn't done.
Just to clarify, I'm talking about the fact that this person has done nothing with their life. You're working, you're going on with your life, you're having relationships, you're
Oh,
cultivating, you're moving on, you feel the pain, but you're not stuck in a rut doing nothing with your life. That's what I'm
oh,
trying to say. That type of deep ass depression where you're just there. Not the depression of like a functioning depressed person, trying to
yeah.
live.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
just to clarify
that's
whoever's
rough.
listening to this.
That's rough. But that's, and sometimes maybe it takes an outside eye being like for them to get a professional guidance as to how to cope. And it's really difficult to tell somebody like move on because it can be interpreted in a way that you don't mean it.
No,
You know what
right.
I mean? Move on is a positive thing. Move on. That doesn't mean you forget. That doesn't mean it's not meaningful. But to the person that's still going through it so heavy, move on is like, you freaking move on. You get over it. You know what I mean?
Right, and that's not what I mean at all. I'm just saying,
I
like, damn,
know, I know.
go live your life a little bit. Like, I think mom would have been very happy if you would have, done something productive with whatever the fuck you have left of your life. Live it. She didn't even get the chance to. Can you at least do it? That type of way. That's what I
Yeah.
mean.
No,
And
I totally get what you're saying, and I agree. Maybe it is time for her at this point, 8 years, to get guidance on how to cope and move on. Because absolutely, like what you just said, I totally agree with. These individuals who've passed on, some of them got the opportunity to live a long, glorious life, and they would want you to do the same. And for those whose lives were not lived full out, that were taken too soon, it's kind of like in you staying stagnant, um you're not appreciating the life that you still do get to have. And that sounds really harsh. You know what I was realizing? Ahora todo, like you have to second guess everything you say, but the reality is like we hope that our viewers, our listeners know that we're always coming from a place of love.
no, of course, I
You
hope
know?
that's what they're listening to.
And also that we're hashtag not therapists, but that when we say certain things, it's we've lived a lot of this, and we've seen the importance of coping and persevering and moving on, right? And that there's more in that than in staying stagnant, and it's more of a celebration and appreciation for who these people were in your life. No one's saying don't mourn or be depressed or go through your grief. It's just to stay there is unhealthy for yourself, for the memory of what was, who was. And it's like, yeah, I was like, the next thing you know, you're passing away, and what did you do with your life?
Right. And that's the thing that I'm saying, that we're watching and it's like, what can we do when they don't want help? So we are watching them deteriorate slowly in a way, mentally or whatever the case is, and I'm the type of person I have don't know patience for that. I know that sounds rude or like dismissive or insensitive or cold. I just don't have time for that. I don't. I have to live my life. So there's 5 other siblings. Let's see who could deal with that. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, but we all do. We all deal with all this differently. Like it's basically like her being lost as well. Like we lost her as well, because
Yeah.
she's not here. It's not the same sibling we had. So in reality, it's like a different person. So how can we deal with that? How can it's also coping. We're coping to the fact that it hit
And
them.
that loss is really difficult because that person is not gone. They're there. You see them. You still have engagement with them, but it's like a shell of the person.
Right, exactly. So and it's difficult. It is difficult, and my dad was married to my mom for 30 something years, and he's doing well. He's okay. So you see everybody deals with it differently, and once we understand that it's okay for everybody to grieve however they're grieving the way that they do, it's fine. Like, what you just reminded me of? Someone was grieving their spouse just passed away from COVID, and they were grieving through the internet, through the interwebs, through Twitter, whatever the case was. Somebody literally told them, if your spouse passed away, what the fuck are you doing on Twitter? Let them grieve. They're grieving the way that they want to. Maybe it's a form of comfort.
I mean, we're also in a pandemic. It's very difficult to be near people, you know? So social media right now is the way that we have of connecting. It's really interesting, social media, right? Because it could be such an evil and it could also be such a helpful tool, right? And we find these quotes that help us kind of like my quotey quotes, that they help us cope or deal or think of things differently. We find videos of people dealing, but we're also able to reach out and share our thoughts, and then somebody responds and we don't feel so alone because they're like, yeah, I relate to that, or to hear from someone, I'm sorry for your loss. I remember like a friend of mine lost her mother recently to COVID. She made a beautiful tribute on her page. I never met her mother. I know my friend. That was sad for my friend and her loss. And seeing how much pain she felt. But to see that beautiful tribute of how much she loved, this woman, and to see the comments from other people who had met this woman and see how much she was loved, it's like, it makes you appreciate, like, there was somebody in this world that I'm sorry I didn't get to meet, but how wonderful that they are part of you who I have been able to share with. We forget our humanity sometimes.
It's also difficult when it's like something out of every death is possibly out of your control. Like when somebody gets hit by a car, instant death, or like COVID, or something gradual like that, like cancer. And it's like, or like when somebody shoots someone, like things like that. And you just stay there and it's like, what the fuck, if this wouldn't have happened. But certain things are out of our control. And it's like, I think that's harder to deal with because we really couldn't have done nothing about it. Do you want to share your quotes?
I'll share my quotey quote. Perhaps they are not stars, but rather openings in heaven where the love of our lost ones pours through and shines down upon us to let us know that they are happy. That's an Eskimo proverb. And I like it because even if you don't believe in heaven or in an afterlife or anything like that, what I took from the proverb is, this concept that we're all energy.
Right. Exactly.
We come from, yes, we come from our mothers, but we come from nature. We come from this world. And in the end, we go back to it. We are walking around this planet, breathing the air that was breathed millions and millions of years ago by, you know, the people who have created, who have innovated. That is an incredible thing that I don't think we stop and think about sometimes. And because we are all energy, when we look at a star, when we look at a thing, when we look at the grass, those experiences that were lived with those people lost either from physical, spiritual, or the rupture of a breakup, friendship, or otherwise, they're there. The memories are there, and it's our choice whether we want to live in the pain of it or the successes and the special parts of it.
Just talking about, like, the thing my sister's going through. If anybody, reach out to someone, reach out, get a therapist, talk to someone, a friend, a family member. If you're feeling something, write it down. Maybe it'll make you feel better. Listen to some music that will make you feel better. If you're feeling that depressed, if you're feeling like disconnected from the world, seek help. Anybody, reach out, let somebody know. Don't suffer alone, because I don't think that's a way to live.
Yeah, and there's no shame in it. It's because sometimes a
Just
therapist or somebody outside of the situation can be more helpful and has a better kind of like viewpoint of the situation and can help us cope and deal. Losses are sad, they are painful, and the people who, if it's death, like physical death, they have moved on and they're in their better place. We stay here with that memory and that pain. If it's a breakup, we go through the rigmarole of it, but there's no need to stay there and deny ourselves the potential of the new that can come, right? And just dwelling. Nobody's saying it doesn't hurt. Nobody's saying it's unimportant or invalidating it. But it's a disservice to you and to those around you who want to enjoy the person that still is here and still is around.
you have any final thoughts, questions, and concerns?
You like that, huh? No, that was it. That was my final comments, question, and concern.
Mine is, accept that grief can trigger many different and unexpected emotions, and understand that growing the process will be unique to you and to anybody else.
Yeah.
And like I said before, seek help. If not face to face right now, because obviously we can't do that, but just seek help. You have to support yourself emotionally, by taking care of yourself physically.
Absolutely.
And hey, we're here too. Send us a message.
And I think the main message from both of us is to deal with it.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
To pretend like it didn't hurt or it didn't happen is just as detrimental as falling so deep into a depression that lasts, like you're saying, 8 years and things like that.
Yeah, because you're gonna have to deal with it regardless, either today, tomorrow, or down the line. So might as well, the sooner you do it, the sooner you not get over it, but the sooner you get over that initial shock of what happened, to then learn how to live with the loss.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're not telling you to do it right away. You take your time that you need, but like Vanessa said, if you find yourself being stagnant and in that hole, just help. Get help.
That was that.
That was that. We'll see you on our next episode. Stay fearless, fam.
Bye.